Welcome back into the Door Report, episode 277 on a lovely Wednesday evening, August 14th, 2024. I am Will Byrum, joined as always by my co-host, Trevor Hulan, aka Hack Squad, Jim Duggan. Here at the Door Report, we are presented by 615 Collectibles. If you're into sports cards or sports memorabilia, check out 615 Collectibles on eBay for an unmatched selection of sports cards. Inventory is updated daily and shipping is always fast and free. Some new deals are going to be available soon. A good amount of cards have been uploaded recently. Some new deals are going to be available soon, like buy 3, get 1 free, buy 2, get 1 free. Haven't fully decided on what that deal is going to be yet, but there should be some coming up. But check out 615 Collectibles on eBay. Trevor, on episode 277, this is part 2, technically, of the roster preview. Last week we did offense. This week we have defense and special teams. A little bit less turnover on the defensive side of the ball. Still some turnover.
Yeah.
But quite a bit less.
Yeah, a lot less, actually. A lot of returning faces on the defense. We were looking this over earlier, doing a little bit of research. A lot of familiar faces on this defense.
And if you've listened to TDR week after week, you've heard us bring up a lot of what we're going to be bringing up on this episode. This is just going to go more into detail on these position groups and these guys. But the general storylines, we don't have anything new.
Yeah.
I mean, we're both expecting this defense to take a step forward. How big of a step forward, that's going to be more of the discussion.
Yeah.
Because we read off the stats last week a little bit late, a little bit too far into the episode, but we read off the stats that the offense put up in 2023. They were horrible. The offense was awful in 2023. With that said, the defense was worse, indisputably worse,
Historically bad
than the offense was last season. Probably the worst defense in all of Power 4 football. I would say almost guaranteed the worst defense in all of Power 4 football. Close to the worst defense in all of college football in general, regardless of what conference you're playing in.
Genuinely the worst defense I've ever seen. Like on par for some of those old Big 12 matchups that you used to see where it'd be like 56-62, on par with that bad a level of defense.
And so that's what I'm trying to emphasize early, because I know both me and you have higher expectations for this defense this season. Returning talent, returning faces, pretty much all healthy. You lost a minimum amount of guys. But with that said, the defense was so bad last year. So I just want to keep reiterating after, once we get into segment 1, I'll actually read off those team defensive stats last season. So there are reasons to be positive. There are reasons to think that this defense can be better. But I just want to keep reiterating, what does better mean? Because better is a very, very low bar.
What does better mean to you before we get into the first segment? If I was to tell you, I think, or you were to say, I think this defense gets better, what would you mean by that? Because I have some ideas in my head already.
I think, and this is jumping a little bit ahead because we're not reading off stats yet. I think not giving up 38 plus points per game as a defense is a pretty good start to that. I think, I don't have the schedule pulled up in front of me. I think not giving up 28 points to a team the caliber of Hawaii, giving up 40 points to a team the caliber of UNLV. There are a lot of SEC games you can point to, but I think it's just looking like an SEC team against non-conference opponents.
Yeah.
And so I think not giving up 38 plus points per game and looking like a competent defense against non-SEC opponents is a pretty low bar, but that's what I'm expecting to see.
I would just say before we get into it, one thing that I would say is this defense is going to be better because I think they're going to be more aggressive on defense. I think that's an easy way to make this defense more better. Don't want to jump too far. More better, yes. It's hard to be less, I say more better or less bad. It's hard to be less bad than what they were last year. We're going to talk about a lot of the guys coming back, some of the new faces that are going to hopefully make a splash, but there's one guy on the sideline that we'll get into it that I think is the great equalizer for this defense.
We'll get into that. I said give up less than 38 points per game. Vanderbilt had a stretch of 10 games to close out the 2023 season. I don't want to spoil what I'm going to get into in segment 1, but they had a stretch of 10 games to close out that season. They did not give up less than 30 points in a single game. So holding opponents, occasionally when your offense has a bad game, your defense giving you a shot, giving you a chance. Because last year, neither side of the ball gave either side of the ball a chance.
Yeah.
So this year, complementary football of some kind. That is so broad. The bar is so low for Vanderbilt football. If they can show any signs of life this season. We have the defensive roster preview coming up on episode 277. Before we get into segment 1, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Door Report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes and comment on that YouTube channel. We read all those comments. It's now time for segment 1. Welcome back into segment 1 of episode 277 of The Door Report. We have on deck the defensive roster preview, part 2 of our roster preview series, part 2 of 2. So this is it. On the defense, defensive coordinator Nick Howell, out, gone, fired, deservedly so. In is head coach Clark Lea, taking over the defensive coordinator role, much like his predecessor, Derek Mason.
I was going to say, a little shout out to Derek Mason over in the borough.
Derek Mason keeps popping up. I have to bring up this story because I put out a tweet about it because it shocked me to my core. I was watching the Titans' first preseason game, just kind of casually sitting on my couch, enjoying myself, checking out some of the young talent on the Titans roster, and boom, Hulu Live TV, commercial, MTSU, Derek Mason's face, pointing at me, telling me to buy MTSU season tickets, rocked me to my core.
Just superimposed on the TV, just Derek Mason staring right into your soul.
Nightmare. So that's the Derek Mason just stuck in my brain. He will never leave. He's my nightmare monster.
He's your sleep paralysis demon.
Sleep paralysis demon. That is Derek Mason.
We're never going to get rid of that guy. If only he could have taken a small-time job at a school not in Middle Tennessee. Not
I want to throw
45 minutes away.
I don't know if this is a hot take. I think a majority of Vanderbilt fans would agree with this, but I actually don't know. I like Derek Mason. I have no problem with Derek Mason. I hope he succeeds at MTSU. I have no issue with Derek Mason. The only issue I might have at all is that he agreed to that publicity stunt to have a female kicker in Sarah Fuller. That's the only issue I have with Derek Mason. Other than that, he didn't. I thought he said some dumb things, handled himself in an embarrassing fashion, sometimes even after wins. But I don't have an issue with him. I think MTSU is actually a great fit. I think that is right where Derek Mason needs to be, can more focus on that lower tier level of talent, recruit locally. I think that's a perfect fit for him.
Yeah.
As a head coach. I think he's a defensive coordinator at a Power 4 level. I think he's a head coach at a mid-major level.
I don't even know if he's a defensive coordinator at Power 4 level, given how bad he was at Auburn and Oklahoma State. But I do agree. I think at this level, he does well simply because that cornball stuff that he likes to pull as a head coach works at that level to where like you can be tacky and weird and kind of like a lame head football coach. It works at a place like Middle Tennessee State University. I hope he does well. With that being said, there's still a part of me that really hates him.
This is the weird part. We're getting way off track. But the weird part about Derek Mason is you would, without a doubt, I'm wearing a Relentless Tough Intelligence.
I just saw it and I just connected it. I just connected the dots.
Yep, that's why I wore it. It's stuck in my brain.
Oh my god.
The weird part about Derek Mason is, as much as you say that and we talk about him, whatever, and we kind of talked shit a little bit about him, is
Yeah.
you would take granted he was left a program in a much better state than what he left for Clark Lea, undeniably. Even though James Franklin left the program in somewhat shambles, Derek Mason left it in full shambles. But you would take Derek Mason's trajectory over what Clark Lea has done, without a doubt. No questions asked.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. If you take away the 2020 season, Derek Mason is probably one of the better head coaches in Vanderbilt football history. Probably, I'm going to say it probably third behind James Franklin and Dan McGugin.
Probably close.
Probably so.
Success. I mean, we've talked about this before. This is just repeating for people that listen regularly. But I think the big issue with Derek Mason is you saw his ceiling.
Yeah.
Is in I don't mean this in a bad way. I think Derek Mason's ceiling is the best case scenario. If everything breaks perfectly for Derek Mason, is the 6-6 season.
Yeah.
At Vanderbilt.
And losing that bowl game.
That's why you had to move on. But what he actually did and the tangible results, kind of undeniable if they fired him when they should have after the 2019 season. Yeah. Because he brought together a solid group of talent from 2016 to 2018.
Really good.
Was not moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But he brought together a good team, and so far Clark Lea has not proven he can do that.
I think, and this will be the last thing I say about Derek Mason, but if you fire him after that 2019 season when you should have, how much do you think that changes the trajectory of Vanderbilt football?
Changes everything.
I think it does too.
Because it gives you granted, you got a bit of a full reset when post-COVID you fired Clark Lea, and then all the NIL changes happened really soon after that. So you got kind of a reset there. But you would have had a full transitory period for the new head coach. And even if the same thing happens and they go 0-9 and have to cancel the Georgia game, you say, well, on top of COVID, you also brought in a brand new head coach. Of course they were struggling to fill the roster. And I don't think a first-year head coach not trying to save his job produces maybe the most embarrassing thing a football program has done in the last 100 years.
Yep.
And it got plenty of attention. I don't want to keep bringing it up. We'll keep making jokes about it.
Yeah.
But what Derek Mason and the administration did with Sarah Fuller was truly the most embarrassing thing that an athletic department has ever done in football.
Yeah.
Ever.
That truly was our rock bottom.
Indefensible logically was 100% a publicity stunt, a political statement by the university. Without a doubt, looking back, it's even more clear. We knew it in the moment.
Yeah.
But looking back, it's even more clear. This is a man trying to save his job.
Yeah.
And an administration that wanted to prove a point.
Yeah. He's his thought process was, how do you fire the man that allowed the first female football kicker in the history of college football, D1 college football? How do you fire a pioneer like that? A trendsetter, a trailblazer,
you know what, actually,
a visionary.
The funnier part was what put the nail in the coffin. Wasn't that it wasn't even going 0-9. What put the nail in the coffin was during that season when it was getting national storylines about Vanderbilt having the first female kicker, and they never even sniffed field goal range. The entire game against Missouri, never scored, never sniffed field goal range. Her first play had to be a kickoff in the second half.
Yeah.
Because Vanderbilt never scored and she never got it. So all these eyes were on Vanderbilt football as they got obliterated by Missouri.
A bad Missouri
and
team.
Never gave her an opportunity to kick a football.
I will say
that was actually what got him canned, because you want to talk about it was embarrassing to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you add double embarrassing because she doesn't even get an opportunity because your team sucks so bad.
Yeah.
She doesn't even get an opportunity to prove she doesn't belong there.
Well, I will say the silver lining in all of this is the only team in college football history to ever be scored on by a woman is the Tennessee Volunteers.
That is true.
So who won in the end?
There's always a silver lining.
Who won in the end?
All right, let's get to this defensive roster previews. We went off on a nice tangent there. Let's read off last year's stats. Teased them a little bit in the intro. We read off the offensive stats last year, or last episode. Defense, so much worse. Bottom 10 in basically everything. So I'm going to start from the top and read off the important stats. Opponents' points per game, 38.3 given up per game, 130th in the country. Yards per game given up, 471, 132nd in the country. Opponents' yards per play, 6.6, 127th in the country. Opponent's third down conversion percentage, 48.3%, 127th in the country. Opponent's fourth down conversion percentage, 69.2%, 124th in the country. Opponent's red zone scoring percentage, 92.16%, 124th in the country. Now let's get to rushing defense. Opponent's yards per rush, 122nd in the country, 5.2 yards per rush. Opponent's yards per game, 179 per game, 108th in the country. You might think, wow, 108th in the country. Not so bad compared to the other things. Wait till I get to the pass defense, because the reason that Vanderbilt only ranks 108th in the country in opponent rushing yards per game is because teams didn't run the ball that much against Vanderbilt, even with leads. And teams beat the crap out of Vanderbilt last year, and teams still only ran the ball 48.3% of the time, 24th most in the country. Opponents only ran the ball 34.5 times per game, 39th in the country. Let's get to that passing defense.
The best part.
Opponent's completion percentage, 70.28%, 132nd in the country. Opponent's yards per game passing, 292 per game, 132nd in the country. Sack percentage, 4.6% of dropbacks, 109th in the country. The only good part, because I've got to add something good in here, opponents' penalties per game. Opponents were not penalized heavily against Vanderbilt. That's actually not a good thing. There's actually nothing good about this defense. Trevor, any positives you want to talk about from last year's defense? Because I'm not finding any with my eyes or looking at the stats from last season.
No. There was nothing redeemable about this defense.
Trevor, you were right, because I talked about it in the intro as well. But of course, everyone remembers Vanderbilt went 2-10 last season, won the first 2 games of the year, and then lost 10 straight. Vanderbilt started out the year winning 35-28 against Hawaii, then beat Alabama A&M 47-13. Vanderbilt's defense then proceeded to give up 36 points, 40 points, 45 points, 38 points, 38 points, 37 points, 33 points, 31 points, 47 points, and 48 points. Horrible.
Generous defense.
Very generous defense. Very nice defense. Just allowed the offense to do whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that is why you have Clark Lea taking over, because that is Clark Lea's bread and butter. When I went on the SEC Unfiltered podcast and we started discussing Clark Lea taking over the defense, he said it's one thing when a side of the ball is struggling. It's another thing when that side of the ball is what your head coach's bread and butter is.
Yep.
That's what he's built his name on as a coach. And underneath a Clark Lea regime, the defense cannot be this bad.
Yep.
He's a defensive mind. He had to take over the defense in an attempt to save his job.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. I think that's the biggest X factor for this defense moving forward this season, is how much better do they get under a defensive mastermind? Because I get it. It's easy to take a dump on Clark Lea given the state of the Vanderbilt football program. I totally get that. But we need to remember, this guy was a Broyles Award winner, I believe. If not winner, certainly finalist for how good of a defensive coordinator he was at Notre Dame. This guy knows defense. This guy knows how to call defense. This guy knows how to coach defense. How much of an asset is he going to be this season for this Vanderbilt defense now that this is his baby?
We got to hope for vast improvement, because vast improvement is the only thing that's going to make this defense even decent. So let's go ahead and get to the roster, since this is titled Roster Preview. We're going to start with the big uglies, I think. We're going to start on the interior of this defense on the defensive line. So just like we did last episode, I'm going to kind of go through and say who's out, who graduated or transferred out, and then I'm just going to discuss who's currently on the roster, because there's so much less movement both in and out on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
On the offensive side, every single position group we were talking about, 2 or 3 transfers in, 2 or 3 transfers out, not near as much movement on the
Totally
defense.
Different side of the ball.
Guys want to play for Clark Lea and stay and learn from Clark Lea. That's what I kind of took from this offseason, even though the defense struggled so mightily. Defensive line, out. Nate Clifton.
Yep.
It's a big loss. That is a big loss. Very productive player.
Probably the best player in the defensive line. He was.
And when I say he was, led the team with 5.5 sacks last season, 30 total tackles. And anytime we say big loss, just keep in mind, any of these guys that they lost from last season's defense, remember those stats I read off, is how good can they really be? Kind of like what we talked about with the offense. How good can they really be if they were a key contributor or key factor on an awful defense?
It's like you keep saying, it's sort of addition by subtraction with this defense, not just with this defense, with this whole team, really.
I do think of these guys I'm going to read off that left or graduated. Nate Clifton is one I would like to have Nate Clifton back.
I agree.
Nate Clifton was a good interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
But returning, you have Enes DeCosmo. I think that's a guy that everyone was very excited about going into last season. Hasn't gotten as much buzz going into this season. He should just be a year better and was quite a productive player last season.
That's what I'm saying. Last year, dude, DeCosmo was super productive. I was very pleased with DeCosmo's production last
33 total tackles, 2.5 sacks. Pretty solid season last year in 2023. First year in the Vanderbilt program. They also returned Ilanan Wataha, one of our favorites. Big body, single digit.
Dude,
looking for a big jump from him.
A 6'7" German.
That is a guy that if this defense is going to take that next step, Wataha has to take a big step forward. That's a physical freak.
Yeah, Javon, I think it was I forget if it was Billy, Joey, or Robbie. So please forgive me, guys, if I'm not giving the proper person the credit. But they got a quote from, I believe, Javon Hay in regards to Issa Wataha. And he said that Issa Wataha has $1 million body in terms of how he's built as a football player. He's just got to put it together. And once he puts it together, he's going to be a scary sight. But just in terms of the physical aspects of what you want in a interior defensive lineman, Issa Wataha has it. Can he put it together this year? Hopefully so.
And then let's move on to some transfers in that Vanderbilt got. I don't know where you would rank these guys as far as, but I think I'm going to start with the guy that's made the most headlines during fall camp, is going to be a key contributor going into the year. That's Zaylen Wood.
Very excited about that.
We talked about Derek Mason in the MTSU program, but Zaylen Wood, also from the MTSU program, a graduate transfer, played at MTSU from 2020 to 2023, had a little bit of a down year last season. I don't know if he dealt with injuries or what it was, but his junior season in 2022 had 6.5 sacks, 34 total tackles. Last season had 16 total tackles, 3 sacks. But all reports are he's going to be a starting defensive lineman going into the year.
All reports indicate that he has looked very, very good in fall camp, and somebody that had a lot of buzz whenever he initially committed to Vanderbilt. And that buzz has only continued as fall camp has progressed. I'm very, very excited about Zaylen Wood. I think he's going to be a stud on this defense.
And then another transfer on that defensive line, Corday Sidnor from Purdue. Should be another key contributor there.
Yeah.
Similar situation to Zaylen Wood in 2022, had a much more statistically productive season. 22 total tackles in 2022, 4.5 sacks. In 2023, took a step back, 6 total tackles, 2 sacks. Both of those sacks coming in a game late in the season against Northwestern. I'm assuming he dealt with injuries because he only has stats. I haven't dug into it, but he only has stats from 3 games last season.
Yeah, he did deal with a little bit of injuries last year. He's also a guy that interests me a lot. I think what's awesome about bringing in Zaylen Wood and Cinder is that you bring in guys that have a lot of experience playing football, and I think that can only help, especially on a defensive line that has struggled for Vanderbilt since Clark Lea has entered in as head coach of the football program. That's a spot that needs to be incredibly productive this year. If this defense is going to succeed, I think it doesn't go with how the linebackers play. I don't think it goes with how the secondary plays. I think it starts up front in the defensive line. And I'm very, very interested about those 2 guys in particular because, hey, experience is a great thing.
It's just like we talked about with the offense. It's all of the other position groups get 90 to 95% of the talk and discussion, and they're fun to talk about. But it starts and it stops with the offensive and defensive lines.
Absolutely.
And so all this other stuff is much more fun to talk about. And what are the wide receivers going to do? And how are the quarterbacks looking? And the tight end room. Oh, it could be very special this year. Oh, the secondary could be really improved. The safeties look good. It all matters if the offensive line can protect the quarterback and block for the run, and if the defensive line can stop up run gaps and can put pressure on the quarterback.
Yep.
If those things don't happen, then all this other shit does not matter that much. It starts and stops with the defensive line for this defensive unit. And they have a lot of returning talent.
Yeah.
They have a lot of continuity on this defensive line. So if it doesn't happen this year, when is it going to happen?
Yeah. You're so right. And at the end of the day, as much as football has changed over the past, just seems like 3-4 years, football has really stayed the same as long as it has been played on grass. And it's still as simple of a game as it's ever been. You win and you lose games, like you said, in the trenches on the defensive line and the offensive line. You win games by can your offensive line keep your quarterback up? You win games by can your defensive line pressure the opposing quarterback? And it's still as simple as it's ever been. I believe Tim Beck said, if you look in the box and you have the numbers, you run it. If you look in the box and you don't have the numbers, you throw it. At the end of the day, it's still a numbers game. It's still as simple as it's ever been. Don't overcomplicate it. You win by the big uglies in the trenches on offense and on defense.
You've got to stop the run. Vanderbilt could not do that last year. You've got to get pressure on the quarterback. Vanderbilt could not do that last year. So it all starts and stops with the defensive line. Let's get into some of those other guys that are returning from last season. Christian James, Bradley Mann, Linus Zunk, Demarion Thomas, and a guy that I have not heard anything about. Am I missing something? Devin Lee.
I really haven't heard anything about him either. I thought he was going to take a huge step forward last year. I think you needed him to, and he didn't. To be honest, it seemed like he just kind of got bullied at the interior line position.
I was going to say it's almost like Nate Clifton took on the role we expected Devin Lee to take on last year, in a way. Not fully, but the stats-wise, Devin Lee just didn't put it up the same way.
Yeah, and I think Devin Lee, the frustrating thing is I think Devin Lee has the ability to do that. I think for this defensive line this year, I know pass rushers are sexy, and at the end of the day, I'm old school, and I think outside of a quarterback, the second most important position that you need to have on a football team is a pass rusher. I'm still of that opinion, and then third, I would go tackles, right or left. I think it doesn't matter anymore. But something that really interests me about this defensive line this year is they were so bad last year interiorly at the nose tackle and at the 3-tech position. And teams just gashed Vanderbilt up the middle. Don't want to bully them too much because also the edge rushers weren't great at all last year. I need for this defensive line to be good. I think your interior nose tackle and your 3-tech need to take a huge step forward and need to eat up those blocks and free some lanes for your linebackers that we'll get into. Devin Lee needs to have a huge season. It's time for him to step up big time. I think it's the same way with Demarion Thomas. Didn't get a lot of playing time last year.
He was a freshman last season.
Yeah, it probably needed to lose a little bit of weight. I think he needs to become that guy. But I think Devin Lee, this is a huge put up or shut up year for Devin Lee, I think
you brought it up before the episode, and you're big on this guy, and you're going to bring him up as we inch closer to the season more and more. Demarion Thomas is poised for a breakout season.
Yeah.
That's a guy that flashed last season. He's going to get more opportunities this year. If Devin Lee doesn't step up, Demarion Thomas seems to be waiting in the wings to take over that spot.
Well, and like Javon Hayes said about Issa Wataha, somebody that has a $10 million body, can he put it together? You want to talk about a kid with a $10 million body in terms of NFL potential, it's Demarion Thomas. He is built like Jordan Davis. Like I look at him physically and I think of Jordan Davis when he was with the Georgia Bulldogs, now with my Philadelphia Eagles. But he looks like that kind of guy. I think what kept him off the field last year, I don't know about it, but I think he might have been a teeny bit too heavy. But so he had issues sort of, he couldn't go in there and play a ton of snaps because he'd get winded. But my God, whenever he was in that interior defensive line, dude, he ate people's lunches. He showed a lot of flash. I am incredibly excited about Demarion Thomas.
I will say I'm also excited about Demarion Thomas. He's not built like Jordan Davis. Wataha is built like Jordan Davis. Keep in mind, Jordan Davis is 6'6".
How big is
Demarion Thomas is 6'2". Wataha is 6'7". So Demarion Thomas, big body, 6'2", like 330, but he is 6'2".
I stand by my statement.
Body.
He reminds me of Jordan Davis.
Wataha is if he can put it all together, Wataha is a guy that if he can put it all together, I don't know if he has the full physical capability. That's a guy that could be getting a $23 million a year NFL contract.
I think
that's a guy
the physical capability.
But no, I think Demarion Thomas has the capability of being a great player, could move on to the NFL if everything goes right. I'm saying Wataha, without a doubt, if he can be mediocre, would get a shot in the NFL. Because they do not make 6'7", 330-pound guys that move the way Wataha does.
Yeah.
It's can he put it together? We need to transition over here because this is the perfect transition to another part of the defensive line, the edge. And speaking of big physical freaks that have NFL bodies that have to put it together and have not put it together thus far in their career, Darren Agu on that edge position. Presumed starter again on the edge. Had a bit of a disappointing season last year. Presumed, I'm saying. I don't know if it's actually going to happen based on what they've seen in fall camp. But Darren Agu was a guy we were expecting to be a complete disruptor last year. Yeah. He was basically non-existent. Forgot he was on the field.
Yeah, Darren Agu, everybody on this team, as long as you suit up for the Vanderbilt Commodores, I will love you with every last breath I have. There's no other way to put it than Darren Agu has been an absolute huge disappointment since he has signed with this football program. And this is a kid that was very highly touted coming out of high school. I followed him through recruiting whenever he committed to Vanderbilt. Going up toward, he flipped from Notre Dame to Vanderbilt. Leading up to signing day, Tennessee wanted him bad, and Tennessee made a hell of a push on Darren Agu. Clark Lea and the staff was able to keep him and retain him and eventually sign him. As we all know, he is with the Vanderbilt Commodores right now, but just a kid that has not put it together, man. And I don't want to beat him up, but let's just call a spade a spade. Darren Agu has been a huge disappointment ever since he has signed with the Vanderbilt Commodores. Is he going to put it together? I don't know. If you want my 2 cents on it, if I had like a little crystal ball in front of me, I don't think he's one of the starting edge rushers for this team this year.
I mean, as an edge rusher going into last season, if you'd have told me Darren Agu was going to have half a sack the entire season, I would have laughed. And that's what he had. I mean, I know he's not always being asked to rush the quarterback aggressively in this Clark Lea defense.
Last year he was.
But pretty much that's what he was asked to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound dumb and be like, your only job as an edge is to rush the passer, because I know it's more complicated than that. But having half a sack as a starting edge.
Unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. And that's probably why there are murmurs that he's possibly going to be replaced at that starting edge position.
He's so slow off the line, and that's frustrating because a lot of the guys that were scouting him whenever he was a recruit said that this kid is fast as hell off the ball, and he is just he can't get a jump on these edge rushers or on these edge offensive linemen at the tackle position, and he can't get a push on them at all. He just seems like he's stuck in mud once they put their hands on him. And it's super, super frustrating, man. Just a kid that's, I hate to, been a disappointment. Is he going to take that step forward? I don't know. It seems like he's getting buried with this group of edge rushers.
And they also, in that group, have Miles Capers and BJ Diakite. So 2 very solid players returning in that edge group.
I think BJ Diakite, if we want to stay on the topic of kids that have good bodies, and we'll get to another guy, I think BJ has an absolutely insane body that if he put it together could be a really good player. I'm still wanting to see more from Miles Capers. Wasn't great last year. I think you need him to pop. You need him to be big this year.
You need him to be better. Trevor, let's take a quick TDR cocktail break and then get to the linebackers and defensive backs and special teams. So we're going to grab ourselves a cold beverage as Trevor pops in a fresh Zen. So grab yourself a cold one out there, and we will be back with the rest of the defensive roster preview. back from the TDR cocktail break. I hope you have yourself a delicious cold one, because we are about to get into a position it's actually going to be pretty enjoyable to talk about. A lot of talent here at the linebacker position, but I'm going to start with guys that are leaving the program at the linebacker position. So put up whatever beverage you are sipping on, hold it up high, and clink cups with me, because Ethan Barr has transferred.
Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
The Door Report has never and will never be a podcast that shits on individual players. We are not that. We are not that. We will give valid criticisms of individual players. But we're not just going to pick a guy and be like, screw that guy. He sucks. He's awful. The worst we've ever seen. We don't do that unless we don't ever really do that.
Unless it's Ethan Barr.
No. But the thing is, we do give valid criticisms.
Yeah.
And Ethan Barr was objectively awful at middle linebacker.
Yeah.
The last couple seasons.
Yeah.
He put up decent tackle numbers because if he can get you in his grasp, if he can grab you, he can take you to the ground. Solid tackler. The problem is he's running in fucking mud.
Yeah.
And is maybe the slowest power 4 linebacker I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And the fact he continued to start, maybe that's an indictment of the linebacker room. Or maybe that's an indictment of this coaching staff's ability to evaluate talent.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one. But we're obviously missing something, because Ethan Barr initially got an offer and accepted a scholarship to go and transfer to Washington, who played in the college football playoff last season. That fell through, and now he's at UCF, another very solid program. Maybe it's just his leadership qualities, but he was awful.
Yeah.
He was just awful.
I think probably what it is I think in the film room, I'm not saying this to be facetious. I think in the film room, I think he's very smart. Like I think he has a very, very good and advanced ability to read an offense. I think his communication is probably good. Just in terms of the physical aspects of what you need your linebacker to possess in the modern game of football, he had none of it. The guy couldn't run support. He
could run support
if he could get to the gap.
If
the
issue.
It
was an interior run, occasionally he was decent. It's just he had no gap coverage.
Occasionally, but there were also times where he just couldn't. He knew what gap he was supposed to get to, and he just could not get there. Like, he was super slow to get into the gap, and the running back's already halfway out the hole by the time Ethan Barr has taken 2 steps. So he wasn't great in that. Yeah, like you said, if he got his hands on you, he could take you to the ground. The thing that he was worst at is he legitimately might be the worst pass coverage linebacker I've ever seen in my life. You want to talk about a fucking liability, pardon my French? Ethan Barr was a liability in pass coverage.
If this was 1993, Ethan Barr would have been a solid linebacker.
Yeah.
The problem is it was 2023.
Yeah.
That's my entire indictment. He was built to play in the 90s. And unfortunately, linebackers have to be a lot quicker sideline to sideline now. Yeah. Ethan Barr just did not possess that.
He was built to wear a cowboy collar.
He was. That man looked like he needed to wear a cowboy collar and a big bucket helmet. And giant, oversized shoulder pads.
The dirtiest bucket you've ever seen.
Vanderbilt also loses Kane Patterson, dealt with injuries throughout the entire year.
Great guy.
Kane Patterson was a great player that just... his knees truly just gave out on him. Former Clemson linebacker.
And in his defense, he played a lot of football before he got to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Like Clemson kind of ran him into he wasn't like a perennial starter, but like Clemson kind of ran him into the ground.
Sometimes you just have bad luck with injuries. Yeah. And Kane Patterson, it wasn't soft tissue stuff. He actually just had bad luck with real injuries, not hamstring and turned ankles. And trust me, as a man that has experienced a lot of turned ankles, they hurt really bad, but I don't consider them on the same level that Kane Patterson dealt with.
Yeah.
But you also bring back I was going to say the most talented, but the second most talented player on this entire roster.
You can make an argument he might be
the first. You could make the argument he might be the first, but Langston Patterson, Kane Patterson's brother, returns. prepped for a true breakout season. Had a breakout season to Vanderbilt fans, maybe last season, but has the opportunity to be an all SEC caliber linebacker this upcoming year. I believe that much in Langston Patterson.
Yep.
Vanderbilt has a history of having really solid interior linebackers. You can go back to Jonathan Goff, Chris Marv. Langston Patterson has a chance to be better than any of them.
Chris Gaines.
Throwback
Chris Gaines. The Iron Man.
Zach Cunningham. Langston Patterson has a chance to be in that echelon or better than any of them. Langston Patterson is a different level of talent than Vanderbilt usually has. I have huge expectations for him this year.
Yeah, you talk about this all the time in terms of comparing Vanderbilt's talent to other SEC talent, and you look at the roster and you're like, not a lot of guys on this team would start or even play for other SEC programs. Langston Patterson's different. Langston, I truly believe, would be a starter at any other SEC program.
Oh, without a doubt.
He's got everything you want in a football player, and I totally agree. I think you made a great point. Langston Patterson had a breakout year to Vanderbilt fans last year.
Yes.
But I agree. I think Langston Patterson this year is going to get serious national spotlight coverage on him for how good of a football player he is.
Well, the best thing to point out is just the stats from last season. Is he had a breakout season to Vanderbilt fans, but you lost your fourth leading tackler in Ethan Barr with 54 total tackles. Your number one leading tackler from last year was Langston Patterson with 74. No other player on Vanderbilt's roster had over 60.
Do you think he breaks Zach Cunningham's total tackle record for a season? I think he could.
We might have to get into that next episode in our bold predictions.
I think he could.
There's a possibility. Huge expectations for Langston Patterson. Going on to the next player with expectations that are, Trevor's reading my screen before I did. If you heard that laugh from him, a guy that do we have huge expectations? Do we have no expectations? Are we even going to see him on the field? Prince Collie.
Are we even sure he's a real person?
Maybe one of the, if not the most hyped up transfer Vanderbilt has ever gotten.
Yeah.
A potential superstar. Came in before the 2023 season. Did not see him all last season. Haven't heard a ton about him during this camp, besides he looks pretty decent, pretty solid. And is he going to be a key contributor? Is he ever going to play? Is he going to be a superstar? Is he going to be horrible? No idea what to expect from Prince Collie.
Yeah, I wish I could add more about him, but we legitimately, I'm not sure Prince Collie's even a real person. I don't think he's a real human being. I don't think Prince Collie exists. I think he is a figment of our imagination.
There's a good possibility at this point that he's not real.
But I don't know what expectations to give the kid, because you don't know anything about him. He's been in this program for over a year. We know nothing about this kid. I'm not sure the coaching staff really knows much about him. I mean, Lazinski probably knows the most about him because Lazinski recruited him to Notre Dame and has obviously spent a lot of time with him in the linebacker room at Vanderbilt. Other than that, I'm not sure Clark Lea even knows if he exists. Has Clark Lea even ever seen this kid before?
He might just be a figment of our imagination. Another guy that we should have high expectations for that I think might be a dark horse for a breakout player. People are expecting things out of Prince Collie, expecting things out of Langston. We ran through the D-line already. We'll get to the secondary. Brian Longwell.
I love that kid.
Going into his sophomore season, 38 total tackles last season, contributed heavily as a freshman. I think you could see a huge jump from him in contribution, and he might be the linchpin, the key to this linebacking group be taking that big jump versus just slightly improving, because Langston's going to Langston.
Yeah.
The big key is him staying healthy. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to be a star. He's going to be the best or second best player on this defense besides CJ Taylor. Can Longwell take the next step and jump up from 38 total tackles to 50 this season?
I think it's reasonable to say...
Take the Ethan Barr role.
I think it's reasonable to say yes, because what you saw to Brian Longwell last year shocked everybody. I think it probably shocked Brian Longwell. With that being said, he did have a really, really good spring and fall. before last season. I don't think he was a spring enrollee. I know he had a really good fall. I remember specifically there was a lot of buzz about Brian Longwell and London Humphreys in the fall camp of last year. And Brian Longwell sort of shocked every Vanderbilt fan with how much he contributed. Not only how much he contributed, but just how good of a football player he was. I love everything about Brian Longwell's game. I think he's really good in pass coverage. I think he's a great tackler. I think he could rush the passer if they give him that opportunity. I think all around, I think Brian Longwell is what you like to see in a linebacker in this 4-2-5 defense that Clark Lea runs. I think a linebacker group starting with Langston Patterson right next to Brian Longwell, I think that's a stellar duo right there.
Then if you throw in Prince Colley
coming off the bench,
or vice versa, Brian Longwell subbing in for Prince Colley, you've got something cooking there.
And then I'm looking at your screen already, this next guy we're going to talk about. I think this kid might have a breakout year.
And you also have continued depth. I was going to lump these guys together, but we can go through them individually. Bryce Cowan and Nick Rinaldi. More depth, solid depth at that linebacker position.
I'm a Bryce Cowan truther. I think the kid's got it. Now, if I was a gambling man, I would say that Brian Longwell takes that step forward. I think he's assuming the position of, I think he's going to be co-starters with Langston Patterson. I think Bryce Cowan is definitely going to be one of those rotational guys. If you also said that I was a betting man, I would say probably Bryce Cowan's third in line. I think it goes Langston, Brian, and then I think it goes Bryce Cowan.
See, right? I think you're discounting if he is healthy. I think it easily, not even close, goes Langston, Prince, Gap, Brian Longwell, Gap, Bryce Cowan.
I don't know. I think Brian Longwell's got it.
I think he does too. I think the raw talent, because we kind of know the situation with Prince Colley. We can't really speak on it. But if Prince Colley is on the field, normally you would say he's by far the most talented guy, but you have Langston. But
yes.
Prince Colley is the second most talented linebacker, physically gifted. He is an NFL level linebacker.
Physically, I would agree. Yes.
If he can put it together, Prince Colley's the number 2 guy.
But that's a big if.
Big if.
Huge if. And I'm more trustworthy in Brian Longwell's ability to put it together.
And then you just throw in Nick Rinaldi for some more depth.
Nick Rinaldi.
You're not a truther on Nick Rinaldi?
I'm not a Nick Rinaldi truther now.
All right, let's go to defensive backs. So you have the star position, kind of a hybrid safety linebacker for people out there. Brandon Fontenette. We've talked about him a lot on previous episodes. A transfer in from TCU, former 4-star guy. He's going to take over that star position.
Yep.
Fontenette we talked about the linchpin possibly being other guys. I think Fontenette is the true linchpin of this defense because he could be a star or he could be very okay. Well, I don't think he's going to be horrible. He has previous experience. I think he could be a stud, star, linchpin of the defense, or I think we could look back at this season and say, he was okay. He was fine.
Yeah.
So I think it could go either direction. He's going to be a good barometer of how good this defense actually is.
Well, how much do you trust fall camp reports? And if you trust them a lot, then you're sort of leaning towards Brandon Fontenette's going to be a star. You're leaning towards this kid's what we thought he was going to be out of high school, and that's why we wanted him so bad coming out of high school. And chips didn't fall Vandy's way, but all's well that ends well. He's a Commodore now, came back home. I think he's going to have and I'll go ahead and say it because I don't think that I would have included this in my bold predictions for next week. I think Brandon Fontenette probably, I don't even think this is a bold prediction. I think you could see him being second team all SEC this year.
That's a bold prediction.
You think that's bold?
That certainly is bold.
Really?
Saying any Vanderbilt player is going to be on an all SEC team is a bold statement.
I think Brandon Fontenette's got it.
I mean, it's a big upgrade from Jeffrey Ugo.
Well, I think you've got at least 2 guys on the defense right now that you already know are going to be all SEC regardless.
CJ and Langston.
Yes.
Let's move to safety. Since we keep bringing up CJ Taylor, you have Jeffrey Ugo there for depth at the star position at safety.
I will say about Jeff Ugo real quick. Said it a couple weeks in a pod. I think he's really good in pass coverage. I think that's a guy that he's going to see the field a lot. I'm also a big Jeff Ugo truther.
Jeff Ugo truther. Let's get to safety. Leaving the program, Vanderbilt loses, I believe it's 5th leading tackler in Savion Riley. 48 tackles last season. Vanderbilt also loses a local project here in John House, the fourth, 15 tackles last season. I believe he went to Brentwood, transferred out.
Had an interception against Kentucky, I believe.
Pretty solid player. That's a couple guys. Savion Riley, whatever. He played a lot of snaps on a defense that was terrible. Mm-hmm. It's hard to really judge. John House is a guy I would have preferred to see stay, but with the safety room and how crowded it is this season, understandable why he transferred out. His role, if anything, was probably going to decrease.
See, I think John House sucked.
Okay.
I was glad to see that kid go.
Well, then he's gone, and I don't have a strong opinion on him. Whatever. He was younger. You return CJ Taylor. What just popped up in the middle of the screen?
No, that was just a Google Chrome update. Yeah, we're good.
CJ Taylor, best player on the entire roster.
Best Vanderbilt football player in forever.
When healthy, CJ is a different level. That's a guy that should be and will be playing on Sundays. Mm-hmm. That is a different level of talent. Stay healthy, CJ. That's all we have to say.
Yeah.
Don't practice if you have to.
Yeah.
Just stay healthy. He's going to be the best player on defense week in, week out if he can be on the field.
Yeah, he's one of those guys along with Langston that you're like, what more can you really say other than he's more than we ever thought he would be coming out of high school.
CJ last season, 2 interceptions, third on the team in total tackles with 55, 3 sacks, 3 passes defensed. He's the guy in the secondary. Langston's the guy in the linebacker room. You return 2 of your 3 leading tacklers from last season. CJ and Langston are guys you want at the core of your defense. Mm-hmm. Now, how is the talent outside of those 2 main players on your defense? That's the big question mark. But you have your 2 stars on defense, which is the first step. CJ Taylor going to continue to be great. DeRicky Wright,
my boy,
dog. New number
19.
Number 19.
Tatted on me. Not for DeRicky Wright. It's me and my dad's lucky number, but that just goes to show.
But DeRicky Wright is back. Struggled getting sideline to sideline last year as a safety.
Yeah, he was hurt all year.
He was hurt. Good to have DeRicky Wright back. A lot of experience.
Absolute
Trevor's
thumper.
Trevor, if there's a jersey you actually need, you got Charlie Clark, you got Piss and Pavia.
Dude, there's
actually deserve a DeRicky Wright jersey.
Dude, if freaking DeRicky had his jersey available to purchase through NIL, it would have been, and I love Charlie Clark. Shout out to my boy Chuck. DeRicky would have been the first jersey I bought, but he's just not on the NIL option, so I can't get him. I might just have to go through that DH gate route to get this 19.
Yeah, you might
have
to. They're better quality jerseys anyway.
They look so
You can
good.
just send them $20 and then just buy it from DH gate. And it will still be cheaper.
Yeah.
And in better quality.
Yeah.
But one of the few freshmen on defense up next at safety, maybe the only freshman that's actually going to contribute at all, Dante Carter. Gotten a lot of attention. Apparently was very pedestrian in the first scrimmage that they had. But Dante Carter as a freshman could be a guy that pops and makes some flashy headline type plays.
Yeah.
A high level of raw talent. And if he stays with this program after this season, is going to assume that CJ Taylor type role of being the guy.
I know you mentioned the scrimmage, but in all other fall camp practices, like I said, if you were a person that takes fall camp reports at face value, then Dante Carter he's that guy. He really is. He's the truth. And he's the type of kid that Vanderbilt has really struggled to get recruiting wise. And by God Almighty, they finally got him in Dante Carter. And I think he's going to start for you. I would bet my next paycheck he's going to start for you week 1.
Dante Carter is a dog. Also, his mom interacts with us a lot on the TDR
She seems
account.
like a sweet lady.
She seems great.
Dude, this is also, too, shout out to all the Vanderbilt football parents that interact with us. Literally,
dude,
all of them are so incredibly kind.
Did you see
all of them are so nice.
Blaze Berlowitz's mom put up a
shout
picture
out to her.
we put up a picture of Blaze Berlowitz and said Blaze Berlowitz days away, and it was him doing some
doing that.
doing some picture, and his mom put up a picture and said, "This is a way better photograph." And put up a picture of him. It was a more respectable picture of Blaze. But
so awesome, dude. Shout out to her.
The parents are great. Glad we're respectable enough that parents still interact with us because we don't shit on individual players unnecessarily. We'll give valid criticism.
Yeah, we'll say, hey, you suck today. But
Yeah, we'll give valid criticism, but the parents still like TDR. So we're doing something okay.
Dude, the parents are freaking awesome, dude. Shout out to Taco Wright's parents.
Yep.
They might be
Dude, yes,
they might
be the best.
Taco Wright's parents and then AJ Newberry's mom are probably my 1 and 2 for like my favorite Vandy football parents.
We talked to the Wright family for a while during that practice that we attended, that we were invited
Dude,
to
his
by
dad's
Barton
funny
Simmons.
as hell. Dude, his dad's funny.
But moving on with the safeties, a guy returning that I don't think is getting any recognition for returning is Marlon Sewell.
Dude, the human battering ram. Guns don't kill people. Marlon Sewell does.
25 total tackles last season. We'll get some rotational time. Solid depth piece to return.
Phoebe, stop. She loves scratching my bookcase.
It's because it has black paint on it.
Yeah,
so she knows
she can screw it up. And it pisses me off. She's looking at me right now like, what did I do? You know what you did. Marlon Sewell, I mean, that dude puts people in body bags. He's a thumper.
Just a good rotational piece to return. Steven Sanianoli.
I just call him Steve Shy.
Yes, whatever. Another good depth piece to return. Let's move on to cornerbacks. Leaving the program, I only wrote down one, but there's actually two. We were discussing this before. I had the realization because you were like, there was another cornerback last season. So the one I had written down was Jalen Mahoney.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated 59 tackles last season. Not the great. What just happened? Yeah, not the greatest coverage guy, whatever you want to call it, but a piece that was very experienced that you lose, and you're going to replace that with a less experienced piece. The other guy, Trevor, I think we were. Oh, it was your phone dying? That was the problem? Okay. The other guy that I think was who you were talking about that I was missing on this list, BJ Anderson.
Dude, yes, it was BJ Anderson, and I just now remembered him. I guess he traumatized me so much, I just blocked him out of my memory.
BJ Anderson was terrible. Good to have him out. But coming in as a transfer, I think he's a Wyoming transfer. Correct me if I'm wrong. The best cornerback on the roster. Is a different level than everyone else, in my personal opinion. And based on all reports, they agree. Colby Taylor. Dog. Long cornerback. Tall cornerback. Different level. Should be a lockdown corner this upcoming season. Those are my expectations for him. If he falls short, he falls short. I expect Colby Taylor to be a dog out there.
Yeah. And I know that we weren't allowed to report anything and I get it. Spring was freaking forever ago. If there is one thing that caught my eye during that one practice we went to, is our jaws were on the floor for Colby Taylor. He, like you said, he looks different. And once again, fall camp reports, he is different. He's a beast out there.
Have high expectations for Colby Taylor. You also return Martell Height, who as a freshman last year showed some very promising things as a freshman cornerback in the SEC.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of bright spots on this roster from a defense that was so horrible last year. Martell Height flashed some things.
Yeah.
He had some problems. He has to improve, but he was a freshman. And now he's going to be behind Colby Taylor. Maybe learn from him a little bit and get a real opportunity to take a step forward.
I'll say this on Martell Height too. He, like you said, I totally agree. He showed some serious flash last year. Very highly coveted kid coming out of high school. In his defense, the struggles that we saw last year, I think Vanderbilt put him in some really shitty positions in terms of X's and O's and sort of put him on an island and said, we're sorry, but just like, do your best. And it was a learning process. So I don't hold that against him, but this is a kid that I think could also take a huge step forward for this defense this year.
And then you also return a guy in Trudell Berry. younger guy going into his junior season, showed some solid, okay things last year. Trudell Berry should be a rotational guy. And then a player that has not received much coverage for returning, played a lot of snaps last season, Tyson Russell.
Yeah.
How much is Tyson Russell going to contribute this year in that secondary? I think he's going to play. He wasn't great last year, but he brings a lot of experience.
I think week 1 against Virginia Tech, I think your starting cornerbacks are Colby Taylor and Tyson Russell.
I think so too.
Now, Tyson Russell had a lot of bad, like there's no other way to put it. He looked bad. Has he gotten better? I don't know. Some people suggest that he has. I'm just going to be honest. He's one of those guys that I'll believe it when I see it, that he has gotten better.
You know what we forgot to do? Give grades.
I was wondering that,
Yeah.
but you were in such a flow. I didn't want to interrupt.
Let's go back because we still have to cover kicker and punter. So let's go back and start with the D-line and then run through the position groups. So we'll do D-line, linebackers, safeties, corners.
Perfect.
So we're not going to split out edges, but let's give grades and then let's move on to the special teams.
Defensive line, I'll go C+.
Yeah, D-line, C+.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go a flat C
Okay.
on the D-line.
That's fair.
So not too far away. I think they have the potential to be a B+. I think they can also be a D-. I don't think they're going to be an A. I don't think they're going to be an F regardless. Last year, they were probably an F. I think they're at least going to take the step to a D- this year, the worst case. But I could also see them stepping up and really surprising not just the SEC, but Vanderbilt fans and really taking that step forward we expected last year and that happening this year. Linebackers. This is an interesting grade.
Easy. A.
You go an A?
A. They didn't lose anybody, and the one person they did lose was the biggest liability, arguably, on the entire defense. And you bring back, arguably, I know CJ Taylor, but like I said, you can make an argument that Langston Patterson might be the best football player on this entire team. You bring him back. You bring back Prince Colley. Does he exist? Is he real? Is he an AI deepfake? I don't know. And you bring back Brian Longwell. I love this linebacker group.
I'm not sure you're going to have any A's from me on a defense that ranked in the bottom 10 across the country last season.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm going to go B on the linebacker group. You lost Ethan Barr, which is not a loss, addition by subtraction. You lost Kane Patterson, which is a loss, even though he was injured. That is a loss. Langston, certified star. Then a bunch of question marks. We expect it to get better, but I'm not sure it's a guaranteed thing that this roster is going to get better with Prince Colley. Like you said, is he a figment of our imagination? Is he going to play? Brian Longwell, is he going to take that step forward? Bryce Cowan, is he going to take that step forward? Rinaldi, is he going to take that step forward? So I'm going to go with a B. Let's go safeties. We'll include the star position in these safeties.
I'm going to be honest, dude. Maybe I'm a sunshine pumper. I'm going to go A for safety. I feel like with CJ Taylor back there, that already boosts them up to an insane amount. And I love the Randon Fontenette edition. And then you're not even looking at Dante Carter yet. Dante Carter, the third best safety right there, and he's supposed to be a stud. I really like this safety room. And then you don't even talk about the fact that you're bringing back Ricky Wright. Is he going to be safety? Is he going to move down to a second level at linebacker? Is he going to be like a sort of razor jackrabbit? I don't know. I don't really care because I think whenever you bring back that much experience, it really doesn't matter. I love this safety room. I'm going to give them an A.
I'm going to go B+. I went B on linebacker. I'm not giving any A's on this entire roster out of principle. Coming off a 2-10 season, but I'm going to go as high as I possibly can, and that's a B+. CJ Taylor is the best player on your roster. Ricky Wright, incredible guy returning. Didn't know if he was going to be back. Dante Carter, the best freshman on the roster. Randon Fontenette, the best transfer that you brought in.
Yeah.
In that room. So I'm going to go B+, and that's just because out of principle, I'm not giving any A's. Let's go cornerback. And before we go cornerback, let's mention that Mark Davis is out for the season.
Yeah.
Big transfer in.
Yeah. Sucks for him. Feel awful for that guy.
But cornerback room, how are you feeling?
Thin. They're thin. Really thin. I love Colby Taylor. I love Martell Height, but they're so thin. I got to go C-. I'll go C-.
Shockingly, this might be the only position I go higher than you. I'm going C.
Okay.
And that is on a little bit of a curve, on a grade curve, because Vanderbilt's corners have been so bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Colby Taylor is a different level of cornerback than they've had. I am a big Martell Height truther.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a legit SEC cornerback. I think Tyson Russell is an underrated guy to return, even though he struggled a bit last year. It's a lot of experience you're bringing back. I think Trudell Berry is going to get better. So I'm going to go with C because I think they're going to get better. I can't guarantee that, but I'm going to go with C. I'm not pessimistic about this cornerback room.
Mm-hmm.
And going into a lot of years, I'm very down on the cornerback room, including last year. And I was right on the cornerback room last year. Let's go to special teams here, Trevor. Let's start with punter. The most important one for Vanderbilt fans. Out. Matthew Hayball.
Our beautiful boy.
Great punter. Lost him, but you brought in Jesse Mirko out of a similar mold as Hayball, coming from Ohio State.
Another Aussie punter.
Aussie.
Oh, Crocky.
Let's go ahead and give a grade on that because there's not much to add.
Punter, A+.
I'm going to give it an A. I wasn't giving any A's on the offense or defense, but I'll give one on special teams. I'm giving an A to the punter. Great job bringing in a solid transfer. Mm-hmm. It's a punter. As long as you bring in a guy with experience, it's not going to fumble the damn snap and kick it downfield in the correct direction. I'm going to give it an A. So until you prove me wrong, Mirko, you're getting an A.
Yeah.
Long snapper. Out. The greatest player in the history of Vanderbilt football, Wesley Schelling, our sweet, sweet boy. R.I.P. But you do have Julian Ashby.
I like Julian Ashby a lot. Known TDR listener.
So we're going A+.
We're going A+
Julian
for Julian Ashby.
Known
dude.
listener, Julian Ashby.
Hey, dude, shout out to all the special teams guys. Actually, all special teamers are known TDR fans. Special teams, special players, special guys. We love the special teams here at TDR.
A+ on long snapper, A on punter. Now we get to the position that might not be an A, and that's going to be kicker.
I disagree.
So last year, you had Borchilla. We talked about this before the podcast, a transfer from Kansas. There were split duties between the kickoff specialist duties and the actual kicker duties. Borchilla handled the kicking duties, and Will Ferris handled the kickoffs. This year, you have presumed starter Brock Taylor, who has never attempted a kick in a live-action college football game. How are you feeling about Brock Taylor, a highly recruited guy you just have never seen?
Five-star kicker.
Five-star kicker. But we know also Sam Loy was a five-star punter. So
take that back. I think kicker is going to be, I don't know. Kicker has been a position that has been a bugaboo for Vanderbilt since
ever.
Riley Gay.
He wasn't even good.
He got good.
He was okay.
He got good. But really since Kerry Spear.
Yep.
I don't know. I do love Will Ferris. That's my boy. Shout out to my dog. I also really like Brock Taylor. I think he's got really, really good potential. Had a great fall camp. Apparently, kid is just a straight up stud out there. I'm going to give them a B+ just because there is unknown. I think Brock Taylor's he's got it. I don't think you realize Brock Taylor's got it.
I've got a P, so I'm not going to go crazy. How you're giving the kicker position a B+ with a kicker that's never attempted a field goal?
5-star, dude. I believe in Brock Taylor.
I will be a believer when I see it.
You haven't seen Mirko punt?
D+.
Whoa!
D+ on kicker because I've never seen him kick a field goal in live action.
Oh, God.
Jesse Mirko has punted in live action games. Dude. I'm not saying that Brock Taylor can't elevate to an A+. He certainly can this year, but right now, D+ because I do not believe that Vanderbilt can ever have a kicker that can be successful.
I know you're about to piss your pants, so I'll keep this short, but I can't wait to watch that first Brock Taylor 50-yard field goal. Now that you're in Section F, I'm going to turn around and just shoot you the meanest double birds of all time. It's going to be awesome.
And you're going to see me jumping up and down and celebrating my incorrectness. But I'm going D+ on the kickers. I'm not going D-. I'm going D+ because I think there is potential for Brock Taylor to be solid, but never seen him kick. I do have to pee, though, Trevor. So anything you want to add on episode 277 here?
Doors are coming. I think his defense is going to be a lot better than last year.
I think it will be as well. Well, that's it for episode 277. We gave our grades. Next week, we have on episode 278, we have the full schedule preview and our season predictions. And we will also be joined by a very special guest, chief counsel to TDR, allegedly, Blake Fromang, former Vanderbilt offensive lineman / tight end, will be joining
the greatest
278.
The greatest Vanderbilt Commodore to ever wear the number 87. Some are saying.
But Blake will be joining us next week. Cannot wait for that one. Blake joining is always an incredible time. Trevor's been scheduling that out and getting it correctly communicated. So for myself, Will Byrum, and my co-host Trevor Hulan, this has been episode 277 of The Door Report, powered by 615 Collectibles.